I carefully selected the menu for Sunday dinner, as I did every week. Baked salmon with rosemary and lemon was my grandchildren's favorite, although they never told me so explicitly. I just noticed how 12-year-old Elliot always took a refill, and 8-year-old Deirdre ate every last crumb, even though she usually left half the plate untouched. Once upon a time, these family dinners had been filled with laughter and conversation, but in recent years they had become a formality that my son Terrence observed more out of obligation than out of a desire to spend time with his 67-year-old mother. I carefully arranged the plates from the china set that my late husband Hugh and I had received as a gift for our wedding. The china with the small blue flowers had already begun to fade, but I continued to use it for special occasions. Today was just such an occasion. I planned to discuss the upcoming family trip to Disneyland that my grandchildren had talked so excitedly about last Sunday. The clock in the living room struck 5, and I adjusted my new lavender-colored blouse that I had bought especially for this dinner. My closet hadn't been updated in years, but this purchase felt important. I wanted to look dignified when I would be discussing the trip. After all, this would be my first real vacation since retiring 5 years ago. The doorbell rang at 5:30 sharp. Terrence had always been punctual, a trait he'd inherited from his father. "Hi, Mom," he said, giving me a casual peck on the cheek. He smelled of expensive cologne and the faint scent of the cigarettes he'd supposedly quit smoking 3 years ago. Marcia, my sister-in-law, always impeccably dressed, entered after him, a woman with a cold smile and attentive eyes. She worked as an accountant for a large company and often reminded me of that during our conversations. Today she was wearing a strict navy blue pantsuit, as if she'd stopped by on her way back from some important meeting, even though it was Sunday. "Hello, Lorna," she said, handing me a bottle of inexpensive wine. "It's for dinner." "Grandma!" Deirdre shouted, slipping past her parents and rushing to the TV in the living room. She didn't even look at me. Elliot, my oldest grandson, just nodded without looking up from his phone. His dark hair, like Hugh's when he was younger, fell over his eyes, and he tossed it back irritably every few seconds. "Come in, everything's ready." I invited them to the table, trying to sound cheerful. "How was your week?" "The usual," Terrence answered one-wordedly, taking his usual seat at the table. "Elliot, Deirdre, come eat." The children were reluctant to leave their studies and wandered over to the table. I remembered how Terrence had looked forward to our family dinners when he was their age, how he had helped me set the table, how he had told me about his school adventures. Now my grandchildren looked at their plates of food as if I had offered them poison. "I made your favorite salmon, Elliot," I said, giving him a larger portion. "I don't like salmon," he mumbled, pushing his plate away. "I never have." I froze with the serving spoon in my hand. Had I been wrong all these years? I'd thought it was the salmon that he'd eaten with such gusto. I looked at Terrence confused, but he just shrugged. "Eat what you're given, Elliot," Marcia said sternly. Grandma did her best. Elliot rolled his eyes but picked up his fork and began picking at his food. Deirdre followed suit without saying a word. "So how was your week?" I repeated, trying to lighten the mood. "Terrence, you said you had an important project at work." My son worked as a civil engineer and was involved in the design of a new shopping center in Springfield. I'd always been proud of his accomplishments, although in recent years he'd been less and less willing to share the details of his work with me. "It's okay," he said, concentrating on cutting the salmon. "Nothing special." "What about you, Marcia? How are things at the office?" "The usual routine," she said. "Nothing that would interest you, Lorna." I felt the color of shame flood my face. When and how had my attempts to keep up a conversation with my own family turned into misplaced curiosity? Before, when Hugh was alive, our house was always filled with conversation and laughter. After he died 5 years ago, something changed. It's like my right to be a part of this family went with him. "What about school, the kids?" I asked, not giving up. "Elliot, you said you had swim meets coming up." "They're already over," Elliot mumbled, not looking up. 2 weeks ago." I blinked in confusion. Had he really told me that? I tried to memorize all the important events in my grandchildren's lives, even kept a calendar. How could I have missed this? "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't—" "Never mind," he interrupted me. "I only came in 3rd place anyway." "That's great!" I exclaimed. "3rd place is a great achievement." Not really, Marcia interjected. At his age, Terrence was always first. Wasn't he, honey? My son hummed uncertainly, clearly not wanting to get into the subject. I remembered how Terrence had hated swimming and how Hugh had practically forced him into it, thinking it developed character. But now was not the time for such reminiscences. Well, I think third place is great, I said softly, smiling at my grandson. He didn't answer. There was an awkward silence at the table. Only the clinking of cutlery broke the silence. I gathered my courage to talk about tonight's main topic, the trip to Disneyland. Deirdre couldn't talk about anything else last Sunday, and I figured it was a great opportunity to spend time together as a real family. I hear you're planning a trip to Disneyland, I finally said, trying to keep my voice casual. That sounds wonderful. When are you planning to go? Terrence and Marcia exchanged quick glances. Something in their facial expressions made me tense. Yes, we're going in 2 weeks, Terrence answered, avoiding my eyes. 7 days. How wonderful! I felt a rush of excitement. I'd always wanted to go there. You know, your father and I kept putting off this trip, thinking we'd make it when you were older, but then… Mom, Terrence interrupted me, finally looking right at me. There was something like pity in his gaze. We're going in a big group. Marcia's parents, her sister and her husband and kids, cousin Vanity and her son. Oh, that's wonderful! I still didn't understand where he was going with this. A real family outing. The thing is, Marcia intervened, her voice sounding businesslike as if she were explaining a financial statement. We've rented a big van, but space is limited. I looked at her incomprehensively. What do you mean? Mom, Terrence sighed. We just didn't have enough room for you on this trip. You see, 13 people had already confirmed their participation, and we were running out of room in the van. I felt something cold slip down my spine. They hadn't invited me. Not just not invited, they'd already decided everything without me. I understand, I said, trying to keep my dignity. Of course I understand. It would be awkward to change plans now that it's all paid for, Marcia continued, cutting the salmon into small pieces. Besides, Lorna, it would be hard on you with your arthritis to walk around the park all day. You just slow everyone down. My arthritis. The mild knee pain I had the indiscretion to mention a month ago had now turned into a serious ailment that was making me incapable of family vacations. I could just sit in the cafe when I got tired, I objected quietly. I wouldn't want to disturb anyone. Mom, Terrence spoke to me in the tone one would use with a cranky child. Let's be realistic. You wouldn't be comfortable, and the kids would have to run around all the time checking out the rides. You realize that. I looked at the grandkids. Elliot continued to pick at his food, completely ignoring the conversation. Deirdre looked up at me, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of regret, but she returned to her plate. Of course I understand, I said, and my voice sounded foreign even to myself. You need to spend time together as a family. That's good, Marcia exhaled with relief. I'm glad you understand. Some people would have made a scene if they were you. Yeah, Mom was always reasonable, Terrence said, a note of pride in his voice, as if my obedience were my greatest asset. I felt something inside me clenching, twisting into a tight knot. For the last 5 years after Hugh's death, I had tried to be comfortable for them, not complaining when they canceled visits at the last minute, babysitting when they needed to go somewhere, not asking too many questions, not reminding them of their loneliness. I tried to be helpful, but inconspicuous. And here's the result. I was simply cut out of the family holiday party as an unnecessary expense item. What about dessert? I asked, changing the subject. I made apple pie. We're on a diet, Marcia answered quickly, but the kids can have a slice. When I got up to put the plates away, Terrence looked at his watch. Mom, we'll have to leave right after dessert. We still have things to do today. Sure, I nodded. I understand you're busy. It's become a regular thing, too. They used to stay until late and we'd play board games and watch movies. Now dinner had become an obligation that had to be fulfilled as quickly as possible. As I sliced pie in the kitchen, moments from the past came to mind. How little Terrence used to climb into my lap when I read him bedtime stories. How Hugh and I taught him to ride his bike in the park near the house. How he cried on my shoulder when his first girlfriend left him. When did things change? When did I become a burden to him instead of a mom? When I returned with the pie, Marcia was saying something quickly to Terrence, but stopped talking when she saw me. The kids each took a piece, but they didn't eat it with much enthusiasm. Elliot didn't even touch his portion. You don't like it? I asked him. I can make something else next time. It's fine, he mumbled. I'm just not hungry. He's on a sports diet, Marcia explained. But I don't think you realize that. I didn't say anything, though I was seething inside. Who taught Terrence how to swim? Who watched his nutrition when he played sports? Who cheered him on at every competition? But now I was just an old woman who didn't understand anything about modern life. We should get going, Terrence announced after 10 minutes, getting up from the table. Thanks for dinner, Mom. Yes, thank you, Lorna, Marcia echoed. Kids, say goodbye to Grandma. Bye, Grandma, Deirdre mumbled, not looking at me. Elliot just nodded, already staring at his phone. Until next Sunday? I asked, walking them to the door. We might have to skip it, Terrence answered. A lot to do before the trip, you know. Sure, I nodded, trying not to show my disappointment. Call me when you're free. When the door closed behind them, the house was unnaturally quiet. I went back to the table and began to gather the dishes. They didn't even offer to help. Terrence had always helped me clean up before, and we chatted while we did the dishes together. Now I was alone with dirty plates and the feeling of being pushed out of my own family's life. I carried the dishes into the kitchen and began mechanically washing them. Scraps of the conversation kept running through my mind. We didn't have enough room for you. You'd only slow everyone down. You would have been uncomfortable. All these phrases, spoken with fake concern but really meaning one thing. They didn't need me. Finished with the dishes, I went back into the dining room to wipe down the table and noticed some paper on the floor. It must have fallen out of Marcia's bag when she pulled out a bottle of wine. I picked up the sheet and was about to set it aside to give it to her next time. But my eye caught the headline. Booking confirmation, family tour to Disneyland. I didn't want to read someone else's paperwork, but something made me take a closer look. There were 14 names on the list of participants, including Terrence, Marcia, Elliot, and Deirdre. Last on the list was the name Vanity Lamb, Marcia's cousin whom I had only seen once at Terrence and Marcia's wedding. She was younger than Marcia, worked at some fashion boutique, and as far as I could remember, didn't get along well with my sister-in-law. But what really caught my eye was the description of the transportation. 15-passenger comfortable air-conditioned van with personal entertainment systems. 15 seats for 14 people. My fingers trembled as I reread the document over and over. They had lied to me. There was room. It was just that they'd chosen to take Marcia's cousin instead of me, their blood relative, their mother, their grandmother. I sank slowly into the chair, feeling something cold and bitter spill inside. All these years I'd told myself that they were just busy, that they had their own lives, that I shouldn't be intrusive. I convinced myself that I should be grateful for the crumbs of attention they gave me. I believed that their alienation was a normal part of growing up, that all families go through it. But now, looking at that piece of paper, I realized the brutal truth. They just didn't want me. I was a burden to them, an inconvenient responsibility that they would gladly get rid of if they could do so without feeling like bad people. I folded the sheet neatly and placed it on the table. Something inside me snapped, but along with the pain came a strange relief. No more pretending everything was okay. No more pretending that I was okay with being the convenient grandmother who was pulled off the shelf when needed and put back when not needed. At that point, I didn't know what I was going to do next. But one thing I knew for sure was that things couldn't go on like this. Something had to change. And that something was me. I was up all night. I lay in my bed, staring up at the ceiling, my mind reeling with bits and pieces of last night's conversation. We just didn't have enough room for you on this trip. You'd only slow everyone down. Every word uttered by my son and his wife cut into me like a sharp needle. But it wasn't their lies that tormented me the most. It was my own silence. Why didn't I say anything? Why did I just accept their explanations, knowing in my heart that they were lying to me? The morning greeted me with gray light and the sound of rain outside my window. I got out of bed feeling heavy in every cell of my body. I'd turned 67 last month, but today I felt 90. After making myself a cup of strong tea, I sat down at the kitchen table and smoothed out the paper I'd found yesterday. 15-passenger comfortable van. Those words felt like they were mocking me. One empty seat, just one, and they'd chosen to give it to Cousin Marcia, whom they barely knew, rather than me, a mother, a grandmother, a woman who'd given her all to this family. I remembered how everything changed after Hugh died. My husband had gone suddenly. A heart attack had taken him in an instant while he was working in the garden. Terrence had been there for me then, supporting me for the first few months, helping with the funeral, with the paperwork, with the endless little things that suddenly pile up when you lose a life partner. But then things started to change. At first, it was the little things. Terrence started calling less often. His visits got shorter. Marcia found more and more excuses not to visit me. Elliot has a competition. Deirdre has rehearsal. We promised we'd visit my parents. I understood them. Young family, work, kids. They didn't have time for me. I tried to be helpful. When Marcia called for the first time and asked if I could babysit while she and Terrence went to an important meeting, I happily agreed. I thought it was a chance to get closer to my grandchildren, to get to know them better. But this important meeting turned into a regular practice. Mom, could you pick up Elliot from school? We have a meeting. Lorna, we need to go away for the weekend right away. You'll watch the kids, right? I never said no. How could I? This is my family, my grandchildren. I'd do anything to be a part of their lives. But gradually, I started to notice that I was becoming a free babysitter. They'd bring the kids in when it suited them and take them out when they were done with their chores. Sometimes it was minutes, sometimes it was hours, and sometimes it was days. And I never complained. And then came the requests for money. At first insignificant. Mom, could you lend me some money until payday? Then the amount started to grow. We need to pay for Elliot's summer camp, but we're having financial difficulties right now. I was giving away my savings, saving less for my own needs, saving for everything to help them. And they took my help for granted, never asking how I was doing on my own on my modest pension. And now this trip. A trip I had no place on. A trip I'd learned about by chance from Deirdre, not because I'd been invited. The tea in my cup had gone cold, and I sat there in bitter thought. The house was silent, with only the old clock ticking away. Hugh had gotten it from his father, and now it was a mute witness to my loneliness. I looked around the kitchen, the living room visible from the doorway. Every corner of this house held memories. This was where Terrence had taken his first steps, and this was where he had broken his mother's favorite vase and was so afraid to admit it. On this couch, Hugh and I sat in the evenings, discussing the day, making plans, dreaming of the future. A future that now looked very different from what I had imagined. What did I do to deserve this attitude? Was the question that haunted me. Had I been a bad mother? Hadn't I supported Terrence in all his endeavors? Hadn't I rejoiced in his successes more than my own? Hadn't I embraced Marcia, trying to be a friend to her, if not a second mother? As I went over the past 5 years, I realized clearly that I had let it happen. I had become a doormat to wipe my feet on. I had taught them to treat me like a second-class person whose feelings and plans could be ignored. And then it hit me. It wasn't just about the trip. It was about my whole existence since Hugh's death. I hadn't been living my own life, but scraps of other people's. In those rare moments when they needed me, I had ceased to be me, becoming a convenient adjunct to their lives. I stood up abruptly from the table, feeling something new stirring inside, not resentment, not bitterness, but determination. It was time to make a change. It was time to reclaim my life. The first thing I did was pull out the phone book I hadn't opened in years. Most of the numbers in it were probably out of date, but there was one I hoped to find. Eunice Pym had been my best friend since high school. We went to school together, started out as teachers together, planned weddings together. Then life divorced us. She moved to another city when her husband got a promotion. We kept in touch, exchanged Christmas cards, occasionally called each other. But after Hugh's death, our communication pretty much dried up. It wasn't that I didn't want to talk to Eunice. It's just that Terrence once said, "Mom, why do you want Eunice? She's always been weird and you know she divorced her husband? What kind of example is that for children? So, in an effort not to upset my son, I started calling my friend less often, and then I stopped altogether. I found Eunice's number, and without giving myself time to doubt, dialed it. After the fourth ring, I was about to hang up when I heard a familiar voice. Hello, who is this? Eunice, it's me, Lorna. My voice trembled. Lorna Tandy. There was silence for a second and then an exclamation of delight. Lorna, oh my God, it's you! It's been years, how are you? I didn't know what to say. Fine would be a lie, and I didn't want to complain. To be honest, I'm not very well, Eunice. I need someone to talk to, and you're the only person I can trust. What's wrong? There was a note of concern in her voice. Are you all right? Are you all right? Physically, yes. I took a deep breath. But mentally. Eunice, could you come over, or I could come to you? I just need to see a friend. Of course, dear, she answered without hesitation. I'll come to you. Do you still live in the same house? Yes, still there. That's fine. I'll be at your place this afternoon. And Lorna, whatever happens, it's gonna be okay. As I hung up the phone, I felt the tension ease a little. Eunice had always been like that. Reliable, ready to help, no questions asked. I felt ashamed that I had so easily given up on our friendship because of my son's disapproving look. I spent the rest of the morning strangely excited. I cleaned the house, even though it was already clean, made dinner for two, and pulled out photo albums I hadn't opened in years. In one of them, I found a picture of Eunice and me taken at our graduation from Teachers College. Two young women with shining eyes looking to the future with hope and confidence. What happened to that Lorna? Where had her determination, her self-confidence gone? At exactly 2:00 in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, I saw Eunice, still as energetic as ever, though with silver strands in her once fiery red hair. She hugged me tightly, wordlessly, and the simple gesture made me cry. Now, she whispered, stroking my back. Let's go inside and you can tell me everything. Sitting at the kitchen table with cups of fresh tea, I told Eunice the whole story. How after Hugh's death, I had gradually become an appendage to Terrence and Marcia's life. How they used me when it suited them and forgot me when they didn't need me. I told them about the trip, about the lies, about how it hurt me to realize that I had become a burden to my own son. Eunice listened in silence, only occasionally shaking her head. When I finished, she put her hand over mine and looked me seriously in the eye. Lorna, honey, I always knew you were a selfless mother, but there's a difference between selflessness and self-destruction. What's happening to you right now is not okay. It's not what a wonderful woman like you deserves. I know, I replied quietly. But what am I supposed to do? They're my family, my blood. Blood is blood, but respect has to be earned. And from the looks of it, your son and his wife don't deserve it, Eunice was always blunt. What do you want to do, I wondered. What did I really want? For Terrence to apologize? For them to take me on this trip out of guilt? No, that would be a fake, a handout that wouldn't solve the real problem. I want to change my life, I finally said. I want to stop being an appendage to other people's lives and start living my own. Eunice smiled. That's my Lorna. I was beginning to fear that you had completely disappeared into the role of grandmother. Where do you want to start? I wondered again. What was my dream that I had set aside to be a good mother, wife, grandmother? You know, Hugh and I have always dreamed of moving somewhere by the sea when we retire. Buy a little house, enjoy sunsets on the beach, I sighed. But then Hugh died and I just forgot about that dream. Why don't you realize it now? Eunice's eyes lit up. You're a free woman. You have no obligations. There's nothing stopping you from moving out. But my home, I looked around confused. My whole life is here. Home is just walls, Lorna. A real home is where you feel happy and valued. From what you've told me, you feel neither here. I've been thinking. The house I'd lived in for almost 40 years suddenly seemed like a cage, beautiful, cozy, but still a cage that kept me tied to the past. You're right, I said slowly. Maybe I really should change everything. A clean slate. It's a big decision. Eunice became serious. Don't make it in haste. But if it's what you really want, I'll support you in everything. We talked into the evening. Eunice talked about her life after the divorce, how she was afraid of loneliness, how she started traveling, how she found new hobbies and new friends. She glowed with an energy and vitality that I have missed so much in recent years. Did you know I live in Sunset Bay now? She said. It's a small town on the coast, just 3 hours away. It has amazing beaches, cute little houses, and the most beautiful sunsets I've ever seen. Sounds beautiful, I smiled. There's a house for sale right next door to me. It's small but very cozy, overlooking the ocean. Eunice gave me a sly look. If you really decide to change things up, it might be a good option. When Eunice left, promising to call every day, I sat in the living room for a long time, thinking. The idea of moving, which would have seemed absurd to me in the morning, now made me uneasy. What if I really did change everything? What if I showed Terrence and Marcia that I wasn't just a convenient grandmother, but a person with my own desires and dreams? The next morning, I made a decision. I called the realtor Eunice had recommended and made an appointment. Mr. Lambert turned out to be a pleasant middle-aged man with an attentive eye and a calm voice. Mrs. Tandy, he said as he looked around my house, your property is in excellent condition and is in a very sought-after neighborhood. I think we can get a very good price for it, especially with the current price increase in the market. How much? I asked bluntly, preparing to be disappointed. Hugh and I had bought this house for a ridiculous amount of money by today's standards. When Mr. Lambert told me the amount, I almost fell out of my chair. It was several times what I'd expected. Are you sure? I asked incredulously. Absolutely, he smiled. In fact, I already have several potential buyers who are looking for just such a house in this neighborhood. If you decide to sell, we can move very quickly. I nodded, feeling a strange warmth in my chest. Financial independence. That's what selling a house gave me. I could buy that little house by the sea Eunice was talking about, and I'd still have a substantial amount of money to live on. I need to think about it, I said to Mr. Lambert. This is a serious decision. Of course, Mrs. Tandy. Call me when you're ready. After he left, I sat down at my computer and started looking up information about Sunset Bay, a small coastal town of only 5,000 people, with beautiful beaches, cozy little stores and cafes, and an active retirement community that organized activities ranging from book clubs to painting lessons. I found the cottage Eunice was talking about and spent a long time looking at the photos. It was small, but bright and cozy, with a terrace overlooking the ocean. I could almost imagine sitting there with a cup of tea, watching the sunset. And then I thought of Terrence, of Marcia, of the grandchildren. What will they say when they hear of my decision? Would they try to talk me out of it, or would they not care? What difference does it make? I suddenly thought, why am I still putting their wishes above my own? Were they thinking of me when they decided not to take me on the trip? I picked up the phone and dialed Mr. Lambert's number. I'm ready to sell the house, I said firmly. The sooner the better. That's great, Mrs. Tandy. He was delighted. I'll contact potential buyers today and prepare all the necessary documents. As I hung up the phone, I felt strangely relieved, as if I'd lifted a heavy weight from my shoulders that I'd been carrying for years. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about how to please Terrence or Marcia, or how to be useful to my grandchildren, but about myself, about my desires, my dreams, my future. It was frightening and exciting at the same time. I knew that there was a lot of work ahead of me, sorting out my things, deciding what to take with me and what to leave behind, sorting out all the formalities of selling the house and buying a new one. But instead of fatigue, I felt energized. I called Eunice again and told her about my decision. I'm so happy for you, Lorna, she exclaimed. You won't regret it, I promise. What about that house I was talking about? I'm going to buy it, I said firmly. If it's still for sale, of course. I'll call the agent right away and tell him you're interested, Eunice said excitedly. We'll be roommates, can you imagine? Just like the good old days. After talking to Eunice, I felt more energized than I had felt in years. I began to walk around the house, mentally noting what I would take with me and what I would leave behind. Most of the furniture was too bulky for a small beach house. But there were some things I couldn't leave behind. The old rocking chair where Hugh liked to read the paper in the evenings, the family photo albums, my mother's porcelain figurines. I decided not to tell Terrence about my plans until everything was finalized. Knowing my son, I knew he'd try to talk me out of it, not because he'd miss me, but because he'd lose a convenient babysitter and a source of extra money. Let this be my little secret, I thought, smiling at my reflection in the mirror. The reflection smiled back, and I thought it looked younger than it had just a day before. It was as if the weight I'd been carrying all these years had suddenly begun to melt away, giving me back a piece of the vibrant Lorna I'd once been. 2 days later, Mr. Lambert called with great news. He had 2 potential buyers who were willing to pay even more than the original appraisal. They are very interested and would like to see the house as soon as possible, he said. Can you see them in the next few days? Of course, I answered, feeling my heart beat faster with excitement. Whenever it's convenient for them. Great. Then I'll schedule the screening for tomorrow if that's okay with you. I agreed and hung up the phone and looked around my house with new eyes. Tomorrow, strangers would be walking around, looking at the rooms, planning how they would organize the space for themselves. Strangely, instead of sadness, I felt only mild excitement and impatience. I was ready for a change. That same day, a text from Eunice arrived. A real estate agent in Sunset Bay was ready to show me the cabin as soon as I could get there. Everything was perfect, as if fate itself was pushing me toward this decision. I began quietly packing my most precious belongings, not wanting to attract the attention of the neighbors early. Photos, letters, documents, all the things that made up my family's history. As I was sorting through old albums, I came across a photograph taken on my and Hugh's 30th wedding anniversary. We looked so happy, surrounded by friends and family. Terrence was standing next to Marcia, who was already pregnant with Elliot. Everyone was smiling, and it seemed like there was nothing but happiness ahead of us. What would you say now, Hugh? I whispered, looking at the picture. Would you approve of my decision? I could almost hear his voice. Lorna, you've always put our family first. Maybe it's time to think about yourself. Yes, it was time. It was time to start a new chapter of my life. A chapter where I would be the protagonist and not a minor character in someone else's story. The day my family left for Disneyland started with an unexpected phone call. I was just finishing my morning tea, thinking about my upcoming meeting with the homebuyers, when the phone rang. Seeing my son's name on the screen, I involuntarily tensed. Good morning, Terrence, I said, trying to sound normal. Mom, we have a slight change of plans, he began without greeting. We're leaving tonight instead of tomorrow morning. Marcia wants to arrive early so she can rest before going to the park. I see, I answered neutrally. Not that this information would affect my plans, but in the past, Terrence had always kept me informed of his movements, even the smallest changes. Apparently now he was only informing me out of courtesy just in case. And also, Mom, he paused. I was wondering if you could keep an eye on the house while we're gone. Water the flowers, pick up the mail, that sort of thing. I almost laughed. This was it. They needed my help after all. Not my company, not my presence, but my favor. Sure, I agreed, deciding not to tell him that I might be out of town in a week. Don't worry, I'll take care of everything. Thank you, you're a big help. He sounded relieved. The keys are in the same place, in the geranium pot. Okay, I paused. Have a good trip. Say hi to everyone. I will, he replied quickly. Okay, I have to go. I have a lot to do before I leave. Sure, I won't keep you. The conversation ended as abruptly as it had begun. Terrence didn't even ask how I was feeling, what I was doing, if I needed help. I put the phone away and looked out the window thoughtfully. My son lived only 20 minutes away from me, but emotionally we were on different planets. That evening I watched them load their belongings into their car. Terrence, Marcia, the kids, and Marcia's parents, who were apparently traveling with them to the rendezvous point with the rest of the family. I watched from my window, not wanting to get out and make things awkward. None of them even turned toward my house to wave goodbye. As the car disappeared around the corner, I felt strangely relieved. I now had 7 days of complete freedom to put my plan into action. The first thing I did was contact Mr. Lambert to find out the results of yesterday's showing of the house. The news was beyond my expectations. "Mrs. Tandy, we already have an offer," he excitedly announced. "The Brooks family is ready to buy the house at the asking price, and even a little higher. They want to close the deal as soon as possible because Mr. Brooks got a job at the local hospital, and they need to move within a month." That's amazing," I mumbled, not believing my luck. "So fast." "The market is very active right now, especially in your neighborhood. We can start the paperwork next week if you agree." "Yes, of course I'm okay with it." I took a deep breath. "And about that house in Sunset Bay?" "I've already contacted the agent there as you requested." Mr. Lambert was clearly in his element. "She's willing to show you the house anytime you want. In fact, if you'd like, we can go there tomorrow." I agreed, feeling my heart pounding with excitement. Everything was happening so fast, but instead of fear, I had a strange sense of rightness to what was happening, as if each step was leading me to where I was always supposed to be. The next day, Mr. Lambert picked me up in his car and we headed to Sunset Bay. As we drove away from Springfield, I could feel the tension that had been living inside me for years begin to recede. The road went through scenic areas, and with each mile, the scenery became more and more spectacular. When the blue of the ocean loomed ahead, I couldn't hold back a sigh of delight. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Mr. Lambert smiled. "I've been thinking about moving here myself after I retire." Sunset Bay turned out to be exactly what I had imagined, a small, cozy town with colorful houses running down to the beach. The main street was full of little stores, cafes, and galleries. People took their time, strolling under the awnings of the stores, stopping to talk to each other. It was so different from the hustle and bustle of Springfield, where everyone was always running somewhere. Eunice was waiting for us outside a small restaurant with a terrace overlooking the beach. She hugged me as warmly as if we had seen each other yesterday, not a few days ago. "How do you like it?" she asked, pointing at the panorama in front of us. "It's magical," I answered honestly. After a short lunch, during which Eunice filled me in on local life, we went to look at a house. The realtor, a woman named Beverly, was already there waiting for us. The house was even better than it looked in the pictures. Small but bright, with a spacious living room overlooking the ocean, a cozy kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a small front garden. Standing on the terrace and looking out at the vast blue of the ocean, I felt my eyes fill with tears. This was the place Hugh and I had always dreamed of. "Do you like it?" Eunice asked quietly, coming toward me. "Very much," I whispered. "It's exactly what I've been looking for." "Then what are you waiting for?" She winked at me. "Tell Beverly you're taking it." And I did. Right there on the terrace, looking out at the ocean, I made a life-changing decision. Beverly was ecstatic. Eunice clapped her hands like a child, and Mr. Lambert nodded importantly, as if he'd always known it would happen. Back to Springfield, we drove in high spirits. Mr. Lambert discussed the details of both transactions, the sale of my old house and the purchase of the new one. According to him, everything could be finalized within 3 or 4 weeks, and possibly sooner if no unforeseen problems arose. "But there's one thing you should think about, Mrs. Tandy," he said as we pulled into Springfield. "Your will. If you're selling the house and moving, you might want to review it too." I wondered. My will hadn't changed since Hugh died. It was supposed to leave all my property, including the house, to Terrence. But now that I was selling the house and starting a new life, maybe I should revisit that too. "Do you know a good lawyer?" I asked. "Sure," Mr. Lambert nodded. "I can recommend Mr. Preston. He specializes in this sort of thing." The next day I met with Mr. Preston, a trim man in his 50s with attentive eyes and a friendly smile. He listened attentively to my story without interrupting or showing any emotion. "So, Mrs. Tandy," he said when I had finished, "you want to change your will. May I ask what your wishes are?" I took a deep breath. It was a difficult question that I had been pondering all night. Despite all the hurt, Terrence was still my son, and I couldn't completely disinherit him. "I want to put most of the money from the sale of the house into safe investments," I said. "I will use the income from them for my life. After I die, half of it should go to my grandchildren, Elliot and Deirdre, but not until they are 21. A quarter should go to my son, And the remaining quarter I would like to donate to a fund to support the teachers at our local school, where I have worked for 30 years. Mr. Preston nodded, making notes. A very sensible decision, he said. What about the new house in Sunset Bay? I want to include it in my grandchildren's inheritance too, but on the condition that they can't sell it until they're 30. Until then, it must be used as a vacation home for the family. I see, Mr. Preston made a few more notes. Well, it's all quite doable. I'll have the paperwork ready within a few days. When I left Mr. Preston's office, I felt lighthearted. I had taken care of my grandchildren's future, even if their parents hadn't always done right by me. I spent the next few days sorting through my belongings. The old furniture I hadn't planned to take with me, I decided to sell, some online, some through a thrift store. Many of the items quickly found new owners, and I was glad they would serve someone else. The hardest part was deciding what to do with the photos and memorabilia. I spent an entire day going through old albums, letters, and mementos collected over a long lifetime. Each item held a memory, each photo told a story. In the end, I selected the most precious things: albums with photos of our youth with Hugh, Terrence's first drawings, a few memorable souvenirs from our trips. It all fit into 2 small boxes that I planned to take with me. On the 4th day of my solitude, when most of the chores were done, I decided to fulfill my promise to Terrence and stopped by their house to water the flowers and pick up the mail. Their house, large and modern, was always in perfect order, a credit to Marcia's obsession with cleanliness. I quickly watered all the plants, collected the mail, mostly flyers, and was about to leave when I noticed a file folder on the living room table. Normally, I wouldn't look at other people's papers, but something caught my eye. My name printed on one of the sheets. I moved closer and saw that it was some kind of financial document. Loan secured by future inheritance, the headline read. I sat down on the couch, feeling my legs wobble. The document said in black and white that Terrence had taken out a loan from the bank, listing as collateral future inheritance from his mother, Lorna Tandy, including real estate at the address of, followed by the address of my house. I felt sick to my stomach. My son had mortgaged a house that didn't even belong to him, a house that I hadn't even gotten around to bequeathing to him yet. How was this even possible? I looked at the document more closely and saw that Terrence had provided the bank with a copy of my old will and some documents confirming the appraised value of the house. The loan amount was impressive, almost half the value of the house. Under purpose of loan, it said, business expansion. What business? As far as I knew, Terrence had always been a self-employed engineer. Or had there been a change in his life that he hadn't seen fit to inform me of? I set the document aside, feeling anger rising inside. Terrence didn't just expect to get my house when I died. He'd already taken out a loan against it, as if I wasn't a living person, but a line item in his financial plan. Apparently, he thought I would live out the rest of my days quietly and unnoticed, and then he would get the house and easily pay off the loan. Well, he was in for a nasty surprise. When I got home, I called Mr. Preston at once and told him of my discovery. This is a very serious matter, Mrs. Tandy, he said after listening to me. Although technically your son has done nothing illegal, banks will sometimes grant such loans, especially if there is strong evidence of a future inheritance, but morally, of course, it is an extremely dubious act. What should I do? I asked. Legally, you don't have to do anything. You have every right to dispose of your property as you see fit. If you sell the house, the bank will probably require your son to repay the loan immediately or provide other collateral. So he could be in a difficult financial position? Perhaps, Mr. Preston said quietly. But Mrs. Tandy, it's not your fault. He took this risk without consulting you or getting your consent. After my conversation with the lawyer, I sat in my empty living room for a long time thinking. On the one hand, it pained me to think that my son might be facing financial problems. On the other, his act showed how little respect he had for me as a person. To him, I was just an asset, a future inheritance, not a living person with my own desires and plans. At that moment, my decision was solidified definitively. I would sell the house, move to Sunset Bay, and start a new life. And Terrence would have to deal with the consequences of his actions on his own. The rest of the week flew by. I signed all the necessary papers to sell the house and buy a new one, made arrangements with a moving company to transport the things I decided to take with me, and contacted the bank to arrange the transfer of funds. Eunice called me every day with advice and moral support. She was already preparing a room in her house for me to stay in while the purchase of my new home was being finalized. On the eve of Terrence and his family's arrival from Disneyland, I finished the final preparations. My old house looked unaccustomedly empty. Most of the furniture had already been sold or given away. The walls were devoid of paintings, the shelves devoid of books and souvenirs. But in a strange way, this emptiness did not cause sadness. It symbolized my liberation, my fresh start. In the evening, I sat down and wrote a letter to Terrence. I thought a lot about what to say to him, how to explain my decision. In the end, I decided to be honest, but not mean. I told him how I felt, how it hurt me to feel unwanted, used, how I found the loan documents, and how this discovery was the last straw. I explained that I wasn't trying to punish him. I just wanted to live the rest of my life with dignity, following my dreams. I wrote that the doors of my new home would always be open to him and his family if they wanted to visit me, but that I would no longer live other people's interests while forgetting my own. When I finished the letter, I sealed it in an envelope and placed it on the kitchen table, the first thing Terrence would see when he came to check on me. Early the next morning, Mr. Lambert picked me up to take me to Sunset Bay. I walked around my old house one last time, saying goodbye to every room, every corner that held memories of years gone by. Strangely, I felt no regret or sadness, just a quiet confidence that I was doing the right thing. Sunset Bay greeted me with bright sunshine and the sound of the surf. Eunice was waiting outside her house, waving her arms like a schoolgirl. Her joy was contagious, and I felt my lips stretch into a smile. "Welcome home," she exclaimed, hugging me. "You don't know how glad I am that you're here." "Me too," I said, and it was the truth. While the final paperwork for my new home was being processed, I stayed with Eunice. We spent our days walking around the city, getting to know our neighbors, visiting local cafes and stores. In the evenings, we sat on the terrace, watched the sunset over the ocean, and talked about the past, the present, the future. I could feel myself getting younger every day, the interest in life that I seemed to have lost long ago. A week later, I received the keys to my new house. It was quite small compared to my old home, but every corner of it was filled with light and comfort. Standing on the terrace and looking out at the vast ocean, I felt truly happy for the first time in a long time. "Hugh," I thought, "you would approve. You always said we'd live by the sea someday. Here I have done it for both of us." That night, as I fell asleep in my new bedroom to the sound of the surf, I thought of Terrence. He must have already returned from his trip, already found my letter, already realized what had happened. What did he feel? Anger, resentment, confusion, or maybe somewhere deep inside the realization that I had every right to take this step. I didn't know the answers to those questions, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't care. I had made a choice in favor of myself, my desires, my life. And that choice brought me more peace and happiness than all the years of dedicated service to a family that didn't appreciate my sacrifices. Terrence Tandy felt the fatigue that usually piles up after long family trips. 7 days at Disneyland with Marcia's children, wife, and in-laws proved exhausting, though filled with joyful moments. The drive home took almost 6 hours, and when he finally turned onto their street in Springfield, it was well past midnight. "We're home," he announced, turning off the engine. "Elliot, Deirdre, wake up." The children stirred in the back seat. 12-year-old Elliot wiped his eyes sleepily, and 8-year-old Deirdre didn't even move. "Come on," Marcia turned to the children. They had school tomorrow and needed to sleep in their beds. They got the sleepy children out of the car and carried the suitcases into the house. Marcia took Deirdre upstairs at once, and Terrence stayed to unpack in the hallway. The fatigue was getting worse, but he had to check on his mother tomorrow. He hadn't called her once during the trip. There had been too much going on, and what could have happened in a week? After tucking the kids in, Marcia went down to the kitchen, where Terrence was already looking in the refrigerator. "Nothing decent?" he sighed. Everything that was in there had gone bad in a week. "I'll go to the store tomorrow. Marcia yawned. Check the mail, please. There could be some important letters in there. Terrence nodded and headed for the desk where the mail was usually stacked. His mother was supposed to pick up the letters and stack them here. Indeed, there was a neat stack of envelopes on the table. His mother had always been pedantic. He started going through the letters, mostly bills and handbills, when he noticed an envelope lying separate from the rest of the mail. There was no stamp on it, just his name written in his mother's familiar handwriting. With mild bewilderment, he opened the envelope and unfolded the folded piece of paper. Dear Terrence, the letter began. By the time you read this letter, I will be far away from Springfield. As he read, his face changed, bewilderment replaced by surprise, then disbelief, and finally anger. Marcia! He shouted, jumping up. Marcia, come here at once! What's wrong? She ran out of the bathroom with a toothbrush in her hand. You'll wake the children! My mother! She sold the house! Terrence waved the letter around like an indictment. She sold her house and went to the sea somewhere. Can you believe that? What? Marcia snatched the letter from him and quickly ran her eyes over the lines. Is this some kind of joke? She couldn't just sell the house. Apparently she could. Terrence was out of his mind. She wrote that she'd found some loan documents. Shit! Loan documents. I left them on the desk. Marcia turned pale. The loan? What loan, Terrence? Terrence ran his hand through his hair, suddenly realizing that he hadn't told his wife about his latest financial decision. I took out a loan against my inheritance, he admitted, for our new business. Against an inheritance? Marcia looked at him with widened eyes. You mean against your mother's house? The house she'd apparently just sold? Yes, Terrence collapsed on the couch. The bank agreed to give me a loan based on my mom's will and the appraisal of the house. I was supposed to use the money for startup capital for our construction business. And you didn't tell me? Marcia's voice shook with anger. You took out a huge loan without consulting me? I wanted to surprise you, Terrence muttered. We were always talking about owning our own business, and I thought... You didn't think, Terrence, Marcia interrupted him. If your mother sold the house, the bank would demand immediate repayment of the loan. We don't have that kind of money. Terrence was silent, realizing the magnitude of the disaster. The loan was huge, almost half the value of the house. He had hoped to pay off the bank after his mother's death by selling the house. But now the house was gone and the loan remained. We should go to her, he finally said. Find out what's going on. Maybe there's still something we can do to fix this. She says she's gone to the seaside. Marcia reread the letter. Sunset Bay. I've never heard of it. It's a small town on the coast, Terrence answered automatically. It's about 3 hours from here. My dad and I used to go fishing there when I was a kid. What are you going to do? Marcia folded his arms across his chest. First, I'm going to see if it's true that she sold the house, Terrence said. I'll go there tomorrow. Maybe it's some kind of misunderstanding. And if it isn't? Marcia's voice sounded harsh. What if she really sold the house and left? Terrence didn't answer. He didn't want to think about that possibility. He didn't want to imagine that his mother, always so submissive and predictable, could do such a drastic thing. The night passed restlessly. Terrence tossed and turned, unable to sleep. In his head were scraps of phrases from his mother's letter. Found the documents on the loan. Decided to live for themselves. Do not want to be a burden. How could she think she was a burden? Didn't they take care of her? Didn't they spend every Sunday with her, take her to... No, they didn't take her to Disneyland, and that must have been the last straw. In the morning, after sending Marcia to work and the kids to school, Terrence drove to the familiar neighborhood where he grew up. As he pulled up to his mother's house, he immediately noticed the for sale sign on the front lawn. His heart dropped. So it was true. She really had sold the house. He got out of the car and walked up to the house, hoping that at least the key was still there. But the door opened before he could check it, and an unfamiliar middle-aged man appeared on the doorstep. What can I do for you? He asked with slight bewilderment. Yeah, I'm looking for Lorna Tandy, Terrence said, already knowing the answer. Oh, Mrs. Tandy doesn't live here anymore, the man smiled. My wife and I bought this house from her last week. Lovely woman, by the way, very nice. Last week? Terrence couldn't believe his ears. But how? How was that possible? We were only away for 7 days. The man shrugged his shoulders. I don't know what to tell you. The deal went through very quickly. We were looking for a house in this neighborhood, and our agent contacted us as soon as this one became available. Are you related to Mrs. Tandy? I'm her son, Terrence said, feeling the anger building up inside. And I wasn't informed of the sale. Oh, the man looked embarrassed. I'm sorry to hear that, but the transaction was completely legal, all the paperwork in order. Mrs. Tandy mentioned moving closer to the ocean. It seemed like something she'd wanted to do for a long time. Terrence didn't continue the conversation. He went back to the car and sat there for a few minutes, trying to gather his thoughts. His mother, his quiet, obedient mother, had done something incredible. She hadn't just sold the house. She'd done it secretly while they were away. She'd planned the whole thing to avoid explanations and confrontation. He pulled out his phone and dialed her number, but heard only the answering machine. Hello, you've reached Lorna Tandy. Unfortunately, I can't take your call right now. Please leave a message after the beep. His mother's voice sounded cheerful, almost cheerful, not at all like he was used to hearing. Mom, it's me, Terrence said after the beep. Please call me back. We need to talk. It's very important. Finishing the call, he decided to proceed. Remembering the name of the realtor his mother had mentioned in her letter, he found his office and headed there. Mr. Lambert, an older man with an attentive gaze, listened to Terrence but refused to give any information about the transaction. I'm sorry, Mr. Tandy, but I can't discuss the details of the deal with anyone but my client, he said politely but firmly. It's confidential information. She's my mother, Terrence exclaimed, and I have a right to know what's going on. Legally, you have no such right, Mr. Lambert replied calmly. Your mother is a capable adult, and she has every right to dispose of her property as she sees fit. I will contest this transaction, Terrence threatened. My mother was misled or pressured. Mr. Lambert shook his head. Mrs. Tandy was fully aware of all aspects of the transaction. Moreover, she consulted with an attorney before signing the documents. I assure you, everything was done completely legally. What lawyer? Terrence seized on the new information. I can't divulge that information, Mr. Lambert replied. If you have any legal questions, I recommend you contact your own attorney. Terrence walked out of the realtor's office even more confused. His mother hadn't just sold the house. She'd consulted with an attorney. She'd planned the whole thing carefully. It wasn't an impulsive act, but a well-thought-out plan. The next step was the bank. Terrence knew he had to inform them about the sale of the house, but he was afraid of the consequences. However, there was no choice. Sooner or later, the bank would find out about the sale anyway. The bank manager, upon hearing him out, was predictably displeased. Mr. Tandy, the terms of your loan were very clear, he said. The collateral was your future inheritance, including your mother's house. If the house is sold, you must either provide other collateral or repay the loan immediately. I don't have that kind of money, Terrence admitted, and I don't have any other collateral. In that case, the manager looked regretful but determined, the bank will be forced to take repayment action. This could include seizure of your property or even legal action. But that's not fair, Terrence exclaimed. I didn't know my mother would sell the house. Unfortunately, that doesn't change the terms of the contract, replied the manager. You have made certain commitments, and the bank expects you to fulfill them. Terrence walked out of the bank, feeling the ground go from under his feet. The financial disaster he had brought upon his family was becoming more and more real. How would he explain all this to Marcia? How would he tell his children that they could lose their home? But the question that plagued him most of all was, why? Why had his mother, always so caring and selfless, suddenly done this? What had made her make such a drastic decision? He remembered the last family dinner before they left, when they had informed her that they couldn't take her to Disneyland. He remembered how calmly she had accepted their explanation, how she hadn't shown the slightest sign of resentment or disappointment. But apparently a storm had been raging inside her the whole time. Returning home, Terrence found an agitated Marcia there. She'd taken time off work to deal with the situation. What's up? She asked as soon as he crossed the threshold. Was it true? Did she really sell the house? Terrence nodded. Yes, the new owners have already moved in, and I talked to the realtor. The deal is perfectly legal. Mom even consulted a lawyer. I can't believe it, Marcia shook her head. Your mother always seemed so predictable. How could she do something like this? I don't know. Terrence sank down on the couch. But she did. And now we're in serious trouble with the bank. What did they say? Marcia sat down next to him. What you'd expect. Terrence sighed. Either repay the loan immediately or provide other collateral. And if we do neither, they threaten to seize the property and sue. Oh my God, Marcia covered her face with her hands. How could you do this, Terrence? How could you take out such a huge loan without consulting me? I wanted to surprise you, he said again. To start the business we'd always dreamed of. This loan was supposed to be our startup capital. And now instead of a business, we could have our house taken away from us, Marcia said bitterly. It's a wonderful surprise, I can't say. They sat in silence, each absorbed in his own thoughts. Finally, Marcia asked, Have you tried to contact her? Yes, I left a message on her voicemail. But she didn't call back. Do you know where exactly in Sunset Bay she's staying? No, Terrence shook his head. She just wrote that she'd moved there, no details. We need to find her, Marcia said firmly. Talk to her face to face. Maybe she hasn't spent the money from the house sale yet. Maybe we can convince her to help us with the loan. Terrence nodded, though deep down he doubted his mother would agree. Judging from her letters, she'd made a firm decision to start a new life, and she wasn't likely to want to spend money to correct his mistakes. I'm going to Sunset Bay, he said. Tomorrow. I'll find her and talk to her. I'll go with you, Marcia said. This is about our whole family. They decided they would go together, leaving the children with Marcia's parents. But before they went in search of Lorna, they had to decide what to do with the bank. After much discussion, they concluded that the only way out was to sell their own house, pay off the loan and start over, perhaps renting until they got back on their feet. It was a painful decision, especially for Marcia, who had put so much effort into fixing up their home. But they saw no other option. How do we explain this to the children? Marcia asked when they went to bed. We'll tell them the truth, Terrence answered. That Dad made a mistake, and now we'll have to live somewhere else for a while. But we'll still be together, and that's what matters. Marcia nodded silently, but Terrence could see that she was still angry with him, and she had every right to be. He had jeopardized the well-being of the whole family because of his ambition and his unwillingness to consult his wife. The next day, they began preparations for their trip to Sunset Bay. Terrence called work and took the day off. Marcia made arrangements with her parents about the children, and they were ready to leave early in the morning. In the evening, when the kids were already asleep, the phone rang. Terrence picked up the phone and heard an unfamiliar female voice. Can I speak to Terrence Tandy? It's me, he answered. To whom do I have the honor? My name is Eunice Pym, the woman said. I'm a friend of your mother, Lorna. Terrence tensed. He vaguely remembered the name. It seemed his mother had actually been friends with some Eunice years ago. What do you want? He asked, not hiding his hostility. I'm calling at your mother's request, Eunice replied calmly. She got your message and she wants you to know that she is fine. She is happy in her new place and starting a new life. Why didn't she call? Terrence asked demandingly. Because she knows you'll try to convince her to come back or to give you the money from the sale of the house, Eunice answered bluntly. And she wants neither. Terrence felt anger rising inside him. Look, this is a family matter. I don't think you should get involved. I'm not interfering. Eunice's voice remained calm. I'm just relaying a message from your mother. She also asked me to tell you that she has changed her will. Now the bulk of her estate will go directly to your children when they reach adulthood, not to you. And she wants you to know that she is not abandoning her family. Her home in Sunset Bay is always open to you, and especially to the children, should you wish to visit her. Terrence was stunned. She changed her will, but how? Why? I think you know why, Eunice said softly. Your mother found the deeds to the loan you took out against her house, a house that didn't even belong to you, It was an unpleasant discovery for her. Terrence was silent, not knowing what to say. He could feel the color of shame flooding his face, though his companion could not see it. In any case, Eunice continued, Lorna wanted me to tell you that she holds no grudge against you. She's just decided it's time to live for herself. And she's really happy here, Terrence. For the first time in years, she's really happy. After his conversation with Eunice, Terrence sat in the living room for a long time, staring into space. Marcia sat down beside him. Who was that? Mom's friend, he answered. She called to say that Mom was okay, that she's happy in her new place, and that she'd changed her will so that everything would go to the kids when they grew up, not to us. Marcia shook her head. She really thought of everything. I didn't expect your mother to be so determination. Neither did I, Terrence admitted. I'd always thought of her as quiet, docile, predictable, and she was capable of doing something like this. Do you still want to go to her? Marcia asked. Terrence thought about it. On the one hand, he wanted to see his mother, to talk to her, to explain his position. On the other hand, after the conversation with Eunice, he realized that his mother had made a firm decision, and it was unlikely that he would be able to change it. Yes, he said at last. I want to. But not to convince her to come back or to give us the money. I just want to see her, talk to her, understand why she did it. That night, as he went to bed, Terrence thought about his mother. He pictured her in a small coastal town, in a new house, among new people. What had she become? Had she changed in appearance? What does she do? Was she truly happy, as Eunice claimed? And somehow, despite all the problems her departure had created for him and his family, Terrence couldn't help but feel a strange, reluctant respect for his mother's determination to change her life. He'd never thought her capable of such a move, never seen that strength of character in her. Maybe he didn't know his mother well at all. Maybe all these years he had seen only what he wanted to see. A quiet, comfortable woman who was always ready to help and never demanded anything in return. 3 months flew by like a day. My life in Sunset Bay was filled with new colors, new people, new experiences, all the things I had missed so much in my last years in Springfield. Every morning I woke up with a sense of joyful anticipation. What would the day bring me? What new discoveries await me? My little house on the ocean became a true sanctuary, a place where I felt truly myself. I organized it the way I always dreamed of. Light walls, minimal furniture, lots of space and light. I turned one of the rooms into a studio where I spent hours at my easel trying to capture the ocean's changing beauty on canvas. My first works were far from perfect, but the instructor at the local college where I took painting classes said I had a sense of color and perspective. That morning, the very morning that changed everything, I sat on my veranda enjoying my morning coffee and a warm breeze. The sun was just rising above the horizon, coloring the water with pinkish gold tones. I thought about the day ahead. Today I had a tour scheduled at the museum where I worked 3 days a week, and tonight Eunice had invited me to a small party she was throwing for local friends. The knock on the door caught me off guard. It was only 7 in the morning, and I wasn't expecting guests. I threw on a light robe over my nightgown and went to open the door, wondering who it could be. Maybe Eunice with another batch of freshly baked scones? Or Ben, my neighbor to my right, who sometimes brought me freshly caught fish. Opening the door, I froze in place. Standing on the threshold was Terrence, my son, whom I hadn't seen in 3 months. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes and more gray in his hair than I remembered. He was alone, not Marcia or the children. Mom, he said without greeting, I finally found you. I stepped aside silently, inviting him in. Strangely, I felt neither surprise nor fear nor even joy at this meeting. Somewhere deep inside, I'd always known this day would come, that Terrence wouldn't leave things alone, that he'd come for explanations or, more likely, money. Come on in, I said, leading him into the living room. Do you want coffee? No, he said sharply, but he softened his tone. I mean, yes, thank you, black, no sugar. I nodded and headed for the kitchen, giving myself time to collect my thoughts. I poured coffee into 2 cups and returned to the living room where Terrence was standing at the window, looking out at the ocean. It's a beautiful view, he said, taking the cup. I can see why you chose this place. Yes, I agreed. Your father and I always wanted a house by the sea. I remember, Terrence nodded. You talked about it when I was a kid. We sat across from each other and we drank our coffee in silence for a few minutes. I waited for him to start talking. After all, he was the one who had come to see me, not the other way around. Why, Mom? He finally asked, and his voice trembled. Why did you do this? Why did you just disappear without a word? I left a letter, I reminded him gently. And I called you several times in the first few weeks, but you didn't pick up. I was angry, he admitted. I couldn't believe you could do that. Selling the house, leaving without even consulting me. Why should I have consulted you? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. It was my home, my life. But we're family, Terrence exclaimed. A family discusses such important decisions together. Really? I raised an eyebrow. You discussed with me your decision to take out a loan against my house? A house that didn't even belong to you? Terrence looked away. That's different. I was going to pay it all back. It was just a way to get startup capital for the business. Using my house as collateral without asking my permission, I shook my head. Do you know how I felt when I found those documents? Like I don't exist as a person to you anymore, like I'm just in property for you to use as you see fit. That's not what I thought, Terrence protested. I just didn't want to bother you. Didn't want to bother you, I repeated slowly, or didn't want me to say no. Terrence was silent, and that silent answer spoke more than any words could. How did you find me? I asked, changing the subject. It wasn't easy, he sighed. I'd come here before, right after you left, but no one knew where you lived. Then I called you, emailed you, but you didn't answer. I wasn't ready to talk, I admitted. I needed time to settle in, to get used to my new life. And how was it, this new life? Terrence sounded bitter. Was it worth destroying our family? I didn't destroy anything, Terrence, I said firmly. You and Marcia and the kids are still together. It's just that I'm living my own life now. It's not that simple, he exclaimed. Because you sold the house, the bank demanded immediate repayment of the loan. Marcia and I almost lost our own house. We had to sell the car, take out a second loan. The children don't understand why Grandma suddenly disappeared from their lives. Elliot wonders if you died like Grandpa. I felt a stab of pain, not because of Terrence's financial problems, which he brought on himself, but because of the grandchildren. I missed them, especially in the first weeks after the move. I didn't disappear from their lives, I said. I called them, sent them birthday presents, and I always invited you all to come visit me. My house is open to you. How could we come? Terrence grinned bitterly. We barely make ends meet because of the loans. I looked at my son carefully. Did you come for money, Terrence? Is that the purpose of your visit? He looked away, and I realized I'd hit the mark. Not only that, he mumbled. I wanted to see you, to make sure you were okay. I'm fine, I assured him. More than okay. For the first time in years, I felt truly alive. I stood up and walked over to the small table where my photographs were, new ones taken here in Sunset Bay. I showed them to Terrence. Here I was on the beach with Eunice, here at the museum where I was a tour guide, here at my painting class, here with my new friends at a local cafe. See, I said, I have a life of my own, a real life, not an existence waiting for your rare visits. Terrence flipped through the photos in silence, and I watched his expression change from disbelief to surprise and finally to reluctant recognition. You look happy, he said at last. I am happy, I smiled. Maybe for the first time since your father died. But what about us? Terrence asked. What about your family? You will always be my family, I replied softly. But that doesn't mean I have to live only for you. I have the right to my own happiness, my own desires and dreams. Terrence stood up and walked to the window again. I could see his shoulders tense, his fists clenched. He was fighting with himself, with anger, with frustration, with the realization that he could no longer control me. I can't go back to Springfield, I continued. And I can't give you money, Terrence. Not because I don't love you, but because those would be the wrong decisions. For me and for you. What do you mean? He turned around, a look of bewilderment in his eyes. If I go back, everything will be the same, I explained. I'd go back to being the convenient grandmother, used when I needed to be and forgotten when I didn't. And if I give you the money, you won't learn from your mistake, and you'll probably do it again. That's not fair, Terrence said quietly. We didn't use you. Did we? I sighed. When was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? Not to ask me to babysit, not to borrow money until payday, but just to talk? Terrence was silent, and I could see that he was trying to think of one and couldn't. Listen, I walked over to him and put my hand on his tense shoulder. I don't blame you or Marcia. You have your own lives, your own worries, but I have to have a life too. And I'm building it now, here in this town. What do I tell the kids? Terrence asked after a long pause. They miss you. Tell them the truth, I said, and that Grandma lives by the sea now, in a beautiful little town, that she loves them very much and is always happy to see them, that they can come to me on vacation if they want to. Can they? There was hope in Terrence's voice for the first time. Of course, I smiled. I'd be very happy to. There's a beautiful beach here, the museum where I work, and lots of fun things for kids to do. Terrence nodded, and I felt the tension between us ease a little. Not completely gone, but less acute. I have to go, he said. I have to get back to Springfield before tonight. Are you sure you don't want to stay for dinner? I asked. I could make your favorite meal like when I was a kid. For a moment there was a look of longing in his eyes, but he shook his head. No, I really have to go. Marcia's waiting, and I have an important meeting tomorrow. I walked him to the door. Before he left, he hugged me awkwardly, the first time in years that it was a real hug, not a formal kiss on the cheek. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered. For the loan. For everything. I forgave you a long time ago, I replied, pulling away gently. Now you need to forgive yourself. He nodded and walked quickly to his car without turning around. I stood on the doorstep, watching him drive away, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness, because despite everything, he was my son, my flesh and blood. And relief, because I didn't give in to the temptation to take it all back, didn't give up the new life I'd worked so hard to build for myself. The rest of the day passed like a blur. I took the planned tour of the museum, had lunch with my coworkers, even made it to a painting class, but my thoughts were far away. I kept thinking about Terrence, about his visit, about how our relationship had changed in those 3 months. That evening, getting ready for Eunice's party, I caught my reflection in the mirror and stopped, startled. The woman looking back at me from the mirror looked younger than I remembered myself. The wrinkles around her eyes hadn't gone anywhere, and the gray in her hair too, but there was something in her facial expression, in her posture, in her overall impression. Some inner strength, confidence, calmness. I looked like a woman who knows what she wants and is not afraid to achieve it. Eunice called me out of my thoughts. Lorna, are you coming? Everyone's already gathered and asking about you. Yes, I'm coming, I replied, smiling. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Eunice's house, 2 streets away from mine, was lit up with all the windows. As I approached, I heard music and laughter. The party was in full swing. Eunice opened the door and hugged me happily. Finally, we were beginning to worry. I'm sorry I'm late, I said as I walked into the house. I had a complicated day. Did Terrence come? Eunice asked shrewdly. I nodded. And how did it go? Better than I expected, I answered honestly. He was angry, then confused, then, I don't know, maybe a little understanding? At least we parted without a scandal. That's already good, Eunice winked at me. Now, forget your troubles and enjoy your evening. Everyone is waiting for you. 15 people were gathered in the living room, Eunice's local friends, who had also become my friends over the past 3 months. Ben, my neighbor on my right, who taught me how to fish. Eleanor, the librarian, with whom we took a painting course together. Mark, the museum director, who became my mentor and good friend. Patricia and Thomas, the elderly couple from across the street, always ready to help with advice or business. And many others, people of different ages, professions, interests, but all of them welcomed me into their circle, made me part of this small community. Lorna, Eleanor exclaimed, raising her glass. We were just talking about your latest painting. Mark thinks you're making great progress. Don't exaggerate, I smiled embarrassedly. I'm still a beginner. But a very talented beginner, Mark said. By the way, I wanted to talk to you about the possibility of a small exhibition at the museum. Nothing grand, just a corner where we could show the work of our local artists. That would be wonderful, I said sincerely, feeling my heart grow warm at this recognition. The evening flew by, talking, laughing, dancing. Eunice put on some music from our youth, and we did a dance we remembered from our school days, to the delight of everyone present. Ben told funny fishing stories. Eleanor recited poems. Thomas showed card tricks. No one was in a hurry to get home. No one looked at their watches. They just enjoyed each other's company. When it was well past midnight and I was about to leave, Eunice came out to see me off. The night was warm and starry, and the sound of the ocean could be heard even here, a few blocks from the shore. Are you all right? Eunice asked, noticing my pensive look. More than okay, I smiled. Just thinking about how things have changed in these 3 months, that I've found something here that I miss so much in Springfield. And what would that be? Myself, I answered simply. I found me, Eunice. Not Terrence's mother, not Elliot and Deirdre's grandmother, but simply Lorna Tandy, a woman with her own desires, her own dreams, her own talents. A woman who had a right to be happy. Eunice hugged me tightly. I'm so happy for you, dear. You deserve this happiness. I walked home under the starry sky, and my soul was full of gratitude. For this day, for this evening, for new friends, for a new life. Yes, Terrence's visit stirred up a lot of emotions, made me remember the past, but it could not shake my confidence in the right path. Family ties are complicated, I thought as I opened the door to my house. They are not always built on love and respect. Sometimes they are based on habit, a sense of duty, societal expectations. And sometimes, in order to preserve yourself, you have to find the courage to break those bonds, or at least to loosen them, to create the distance necessary for a healthy relationship. I didn't give up on my family. I simply stopped living only for them, forgetting about myself. And in that, I believed, there was nothing wrong. Before I went to bed, I went out on the terrace and took a long look at the ocean, listening to the sound of the waves. Tomorrow was the beginning of a new day. The day of a new Lorna who had finally learned to appreciate herself and her life. And it was a wonderful feeling.